7 years. We first met at a Perform Better, and then I think you just started showing up to every event that we ran at MBSC. So
the bald bearded dude in the corner.
Yeah, you from Tennessee.
From Tennessee, you can't escape. So this will not be fast, obviously, just because of my accent. So we got people listening on the East Coast; they'll be in for a treat.
Quite the treat. So I will let you get started here. I'm gonna get this launched on Facebook while you introduce yourself, and then we can get right into your presentation. I'm gonna take notes the whole time too, because my new thing is I'm going to supply notes along with the videos now, because I think people love notes. So have at it, my friend.
Okay, well, welcome everybody out there in online land. My name, as Brendan said, is Drew Massey, and we have been great friends for a very long time, as well as Kevin and Dan and the rest of the MBSC crew. We met at Perform Betters, and we just kept running into each other in events and seminars, and again, just fostered that friendship. And I'm proud to call a lot of these guys my best friends in the world. So appreciate them giving me the opportunity to come on and talk to you guys tonight. I think you'll have some really good practical information to take away from this presentation, because I think this is the kind of information that a lot of coaches need to have before quote unquote working the floor or training their first client. So there'll be some things that'll be applicable with training groups mainly, but also some things you can take away if you're training folks in a one-on-one setting right there. So we'll get more into my presentation, but that's just a little bit about who I am. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm a dad first. I have a beautiful 10-year-old little girl. She's going to be 11 in a couple of weeks. And so, everything that I do from this standpoint is based around, benefiting her and giving her the life that I'd like for her to have. So with that being said,
I'll add that Drew and Hope, his daughter's name is Hope, have a amazing TikTok thing going on. If anyone needs to see parenting at its finest, Drew and Hope's TikTok channel is quite the entertainment.
Do you want to share? One of the slides is our TikTok address. Absolutely.
I messed up. Sorry, I blew it.
Oh, you're good.
Do you want to share a little bit too how this presentation came about? And maybe you're going to start with that, but I remember you reached out to Kevin and I and said, "Hey, do you think this is a good topic for something?" And we got discussing, and then all of a sudden it turned into this presentation you're about to hear.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on this presentation is I got into the situation after COVID, after we were able to open. And I know a lot of you guys are out there either just starting or hadn't been able to open, and my heart goes out to you guys. We were lucky enough that we opened in May. We got to open the first week in May. And what I had found is that our staff had dwindled. Like a lot of our part-time staff got new jobs and things like that, that's what they needed to do at the time and things of that nature. But I found myself with a group of new staff members. And when I would observe their techniques on the floor, quite honestly, I felt that we were lacking a little bit. And I had kind of gotten complacent in our old staff just because they had been there for a long time. And so I wanted to create something that when we hired new staff, we could kind of coach and train them on what we thought would be the best way to basically work the floor to give people a great, consistent experience at Game Time Sports and Training. So I reached out to Kevin and Brendan and said, "Hey, I've got this idea. What do you guys think about it?" And you guys responded back, within minutes really of that, and said, "I think this is great. Can you put it in a presentation form? That might be the best way to present it to your staff and things of that nature." And then I sent you guys the slides and said, "What do you think?" And you both said, "Hey, I think this is something that needs to be out there." So here we are a couple months later, and you get to look at my bald bearded face for a little bit before before I share my slides with you.
So what I'm hearing you say is that out of necessity, you almost had to go coaching first and then explain the programming and the why to your staff second.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, when you're entering into a gym setting, understandably, from a beginner standpoint, it can be intimidating, but also the people that have been there for so long, they expect a certain level of coaching, a certain excitement, a certain way to do things. This is beyond like exercise knowledge, right? So these are just some of the nuances that I think are very, very important that anybody that's listening or anybody that hears this, if they came and got hired by myself or got hired with you out at Train Smarter and Harder, or even went to Mike Boyle Strength Conditioning and watched, I think they would see some commonalities of just some good coaches working the floor. So I wanted to put this all in a presentation form so that when we got folks that we could show them this. And hopefully, my goal for this is if I came into any gym, if anybody's looking out there and I needed to coach a session and they said, Drew, somebody's sick and we need you to coach a session, without having any knowledge of the facility, which would automatically put me at a little bit of a disadvantage. If I followed these steps, if I did these things naturally, or it came across as that I did these things naturally, I would have a great session and they would have a very consistent, reliable experience. And so that's kind of what the goal of the presentation is.
All right. Well, you answered all my current questions. I will say if anyone has questions during Drew's presentation, feel free to throw them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. I will either interrupt him. I will moderate that so Drew doesn't have to. And then at the end, if you want to ask questions live, we can do the raise the hand thing. But so during the presentation, let's go chat box or Q&A. And after we can use all three. So, all right, man.
So all I need to do is share a screen, huh?
Come on, man. It's 2021.
All right.
You have this down now.
Right. I teach a little bit on. So side note, I like an adjunct professor for Columbia State. So we do this on the regular now, right? All right.
Zoom?
Huh? Yeah. Everything's Zoom.
Wow.
Yep. Everything's Zoom. All right, Brendan, can you see that? You're good to go.
I can. Yeah, I can see it.
All right. The only thing that might be a little bit of because it just depends sometimes. I've got a video in here that I want to play. It may come across, and Brendan, if it doesn't come across, just let me know and we can skip that slide. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
All right, guys. So let's get this party started. Number one, thank you so much for your time. I think we've got a couple folks on here. Time is something that you can't give back. So anytime you as an individual or as a group of individuals give up your time to hear myself or anybody like this in a presentation setting, I take that very seriously. So I appreciate that first and foremost. But this right here is, you can read that right there on slide, Coach's step-by-step guide to running an ultimate super fun and awesome training session. And the way that this came about is, let's fast forward to a long time ago in a Perform Better Summit far, far away. And in that Perform Better Summit, I attended one of Mark Verstegen's hands-on presentations. And as I attended that presentation, it absolutely fascinated me that Mark was able to stand in front of that many people and get everybody on the same page, moving the same way when he said so. Now, this was not a control thing. This was not a power thing. This was Mark understanding his role as a coach and wanting everybody to get out of the session what he wanted. And the way he used cues and the ways he presented himself and just some of the nuances of things that he did, he really controlled the room. And as a young strength and conditioning coach, I looked up at that in awe because that's exactly what I wanted to do. At the time, I was at the YMCA and I was a personal trainer, which is a little bit differently, but still the power that he had using his voice and his mannerisms and his cues, it just created a very good experience for all the people that were participating. And you could see it on their face, and they trained with the appropriate intensity. And all Mark did was control the room very well. That was one of the things that I wanted to do as a coach. So I started to study a lot of this, and I thought that just by studying this and getting 4 hours and things of that nature, that it would just automatically happen. Now, some of it does. Some of it happens just natural. Some people are just a natural coach and they can do that. And I think that is probably a big part of what Mark was able to do during that Perform Better Summit. But I also think that a lot of these things can be trained. And a lot of these things can be coached into new coaches or coached into coaches that may not be familiar with coaching in a group setting or coaching in a one-on-one setting that's maybe outside of their comfort zone. And the reason that I say this is because we've had a couple of people that have come to us from the clinical side that have struggled as a coach in a gym setting because it's not clinical. We don't have to necessarily be quiet. We can get excited. We can break the session down with a big hoorah at the end. In a clinical setting, you just don't see that. So again, this is our step-by-step guide on things that you can work on to create an awesome, super fun experience for your members. I want you to view each session as a class and view each class. It's your individual game to win or lose. And what we're talking about is this is your Super Bowl. Every time you get up in front of people and instruct them on how to exercise, this is your chance to be the MVP of your Super Bowl. But it's also a chess match. It's a chess match between the folks in the class and a chess match between the coach in the room. And if we think about that, we always have to stay a little bit ahead. To win in chess, you have to be able to see the board and to see multiple moves and potential multiple moves of the people that you're, or the person that you're playing. So a good analogy for this is if you want to win as many games as you can, as you want to win as many sessions as you can, I want you to treat the session like you're hosting an event or hosting a party. You're going to visualize how the session will look, how the session's going to feel, and what kind of energy is going to be in the room, and how the session's going to flow. Because as we'll talk about in a little bit, logistics are going to matter based on what you have available to you and based on what else is going on perhaps in your facility. And your best chance to win more than you lose for a great session is to be 2 steps ahead of the members. So we have to look at what our session's going to encompass and know what's coming up before our members do so that we can prepare ourselves as a coach so that we're always in charge of that session. So remember, each session that you're going to coach is yours to individually win or lose. So some of the techniques that we're going to talk about today hopefully makes you the Super Bowl MVP of your next session.
Drew, I'll just add that with if you're ever in a position where you are an intern or an assistant coach, you should always, along with being head coach, should be 2 steps ahead of the member, but you should be 2 steps ahead of your head coach in order for the flow of the program, because you can get more in, that things go much more smoothly. So if you're ever in a position where, if we have younger coaches on here, intern or an assistant coach, always be 2 steps ahead of the head coach that you're helping, because that it makes a world of difference, and the head coach will definitely pick up on that because you just made their job easier.
Absolutely. That's a great point is that if you are an intern or you are somebody that's maybe job shadowing and has a little bit of background on what's going on within the session, the more you can help out that head coach. Just it does so many things. It not only gives you great experience, but in that head coach's eyes, they want to work with you more. And then whoever's the director of the facility will obviously talk to that head coach and may put you in a position to move up a little bit faster with getting your own groups and things of that nature. So that's a great point.
And the other thing that I have in my notes here, So I don't know if you've ever heard me say this at a CFSC, but when people come in, I tell them there's the 4 P's that you need to do to succeed at today's course, and they are practice, progressions, participate, but the last one is perform. And I loved what you're saying with the visualization, that if you've seen Mark Verstegen, in my opinion, I agree with you, is the best coach I've ever seen coach.
Without question.
You've got the Todd Durkins and the Martin Rooney's, who are the energy guys, and then you got the Mike Boyles, who are the cerebral. And I put myself in the cerebral group. I'm not a rah-rah, but Mark is like the perfect coupling of the two. It's incredible to watch. But it is a performance, and I think people forget that it's not just about the program. It's not just about being able to demo. It's about performing for an hour long. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think within that performance, that's kind of the missing piece, and that's what people will remember. And like I said, I agree. I think Mark is just outstanding at it, and so much of that comes natural. But there are some things that I think we can take away from. So moving on, and our first bullet point last time was treat the session as if you are hosting an event. So if I invited you guys over, anybody that's watching, if I invited you to my house, and Brendan and Kevin and Benny and a couple other people have been to my house, number one, I want to know who's coming. All right. I want to have a class roster. So one of the things that you can do early on in your class is know who's going to be there. So if you have a check-in system, you're going to automatically know the people that are coming. I understand that this can't happen all the time, and in your particular setting, it might not be able to. But the other thing about having a roster is knowing people's names. If you have a system in which you can know names, I know coaches that write it down. They may keep it on their notes on their phone. But for us, and at game time, we want people to check into class so that our coaches have a roster. The other good thing about this is if you have a system that will allow this to happen, you can see who maybe is a new member, or who may be in the class for the first time, or who may be on a trial. If you look at the picture on the screen, you can see this was my class today that I coached this morning at 5:30 in the morning. And you can see that Derek Green is a trial membership. So Derek is a trial. And as I look at the roster, I already know that. So I'm going to make sure that Derek has a great experience. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to call him by name. I'm going to start to learn things about him in between sets. I can tell you right now, he is a school counselor at Mount Pleasant High School. I went to Mount Pleasant. He went to Loretta. My roommate was from Loretta in college. So automatically, we're trying to make him feel very comfortable as a guest or as a new visitor in our facility. And the other thing that is of utmost importance, and this is a no-brainer, set up the facility. So 15 to 30 minutes prior to member arrival, your facility needs to be set up for the session. If you're a personal trainer, 15 minutes before that client comes in, you better, even if you're in a big box gym, you better have a flow in which that client's going to go through that session. And if you can mark off that equipment early, or you can get that equipment out, this is going to drastically reduce time during the session where you're trying to fiddle around and find the pad that you need because it hurts them to be on all fours on a quadruped. So you need to have a pad so that it doesn't hurt their knee. Go ahead and get that out. If you know you're going to use a mini band in their warm up, go ahead and get those things out. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but if you will set up your sessions 15 to 30 minutes prior, and you already know what you're going to do because you're working off a template or whatever you're working off of, if it's a clipboard or iPad or whatever, it's going to make that session go a lot smoother. One of the things that we talk about a lot is logistics matters the most. And if you ever have been into a grocery store, you can understand how they want you to flow through that grocery store. So if you go into grocery store, and you can kind of see it on the screen here, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's kind of all over the place, right? Well, in a grocery store, you guys know that all the frozen stuff is generally on the outside part of the grocery store, and all of the prepackaged goods and things are kind of in the middle. But if I'm running a session, I want to have a situation where my member or my client's going to walk in and we're going to go to our first section right off the bat. And then we're going to flow nice and easy to our second section. And we're going to flow nice and easy to our third session. And we're going to flow nice and easy throughout that. And then at the end, I want to almost make a complete circle. And I want to give them a nice ending to that session, telling them goodbye, talking about the next schedule or things like that. So if done correctly, logistics will allow you to set up the session so the members flow through the gym in a pattern. Each exercise should have its own place to be performed. If I'm going to do squats, I need to make sure that I have my goblet squat station set up. If I'm going to use boxes or I'm going to use heel lifts, I need to go ahead and get that stuff set up where we're going to perform that. Now, in our facility, our second bullet point, you can see equipment shouldn't be used twice. Now, this might not always be the case, especially if you're working in a place like Coach Boyle's, or if you're working maybe one-on-one in a big box gym. You can kind of eliminate that. But for us, I know that if I have a group that's using the barbells in their first block, so maybe A1 is barbell incline bench press, I know that I can't make B1, B2, or B3 a barbell exercise, because now I have to break down the incline. I have to reset up the rack. And in our situation with a group moving through that, it's just not possible, because while my group is maybe in their B block, I've got a block behind me coming into their A block, and they need that barbell. So from a logistics and programming standpoint, equipment shouldn't necessarily be used twice. And then you want to avoid exercises that are going to cause people to feel like they're bottlenecking. And the great example that I got very early on at probably one of the seminars that I attended with Brendan or Kevin or somebody is Mike gives the example of, if you've got 50 baseball players to train and you have two racks, you have two squat racks, guess what exercise you're not doing? Well, you're not doing squats. Because if you can imagine two racks and 25 people trying to use those two racks, that's probably not going to go well for those folks. And they're going to be bored and they're going to be waiting around. And if you train kids, then that back of the line is going to start goofing off. And if you train, preteen boys, it can be a more of a headache than a coaching session. So logistics is going to matter. So look at your session, look at how the logistics are going to work out. And again, this all goes back to what we talked about previously by visualizing the session prior to the session actually happening. The next point that we can talk about is demonstrate everything every time. And I'm going to tell you a story I'm going to tell the Dan McGinley story. So Dan is a coach, obviously with Mike Boyle at Mike's Place, and he coaches CFSCs, and he's a great coach. He is an absolutely phenomenal coach. And recently I went to Boston to attend the wedding of the Kevin Carr. And so during my trip to Boston, Brendan and I had the opportunity to go to Mike Boyle's place and train in a Zoom class. And Dan was the one that was coaching it. And Dan did a fantastic job. He explained everything. He demonstrated everything. And he did a great job with both the live people that were in class, and he also did a great job with the people that were training with him virtually. That's not the end of the story. Later on throughout the weekend, we had an opportunity while we were at the wedding to talk in a group with some of the people that were there in the class together. And without question, two of the ladies were like, Dan is my favorite coach. Dan's my favorite coach because he always explains everything. And he always demonstrates. It doesn't matter if I've done an exercise 50 times, Dan still explains it and Dan still demonstrates it, because I oftentimes will forget, or I'll forget a particular little nuance of an exercise that makes it feel better for me. And Dan always does that for me. And I took a lot away from that conversation and brought it back to game time to tell folks, look, you have to demonstrate everything every time. Because what do parents and coaches have in common? Now, this isn't a silly dad joke. Think about it for a second. What do parents and coaches have in common?
You say the same thing over and over and over again.
And over and
And
over
over.
and over and over and over
Brush
again.
your teeth. Put your clothes away.
Exactly. Hope, when you wake up in the morning, brush your hair, brush your teeth, put on your bra, let's go put on your deodorant. That's where I am as a parent right now, right? Because I don't want to be, as Adam Sandler would put it, the dad of the smelly kid in class, right? As Hope's getting older, like I have to tell her this, and I have to tell her this all the time. And it becomes frustrating as a parent, and it certainly becomes frustrating as a coach. But the fact of the matter is, we are their coach. I am her parent. It is my job to make sure she is ready for the day. It is also my job to make sure that our members are ready to exercise. That's why I put a high value on demonstrating everything every time. They're still going to ask you how many reps. They're still going to ask you how many sets. How long are we doing this? Is this the right way to hold this? Is this the right knee up? I've said I've coached chops a million times, and we still have people that have trained at our facility for 8 years, and they do chops about every 3 months. They've done it 1,000 times, and they still put the wrong knee up and look at me and be like, "Is this right?" Like, nope, switch your feet. So don't underestimate the value of demonstrating and explaining things every time you coach. So here is one, and Brendan, just let me know if you can't hear this right here. So this is, we had to train virtual just like everybody else had to during the COVID thing when we were shut down. And so when we went virtual, Hope would often be with me. So this is my daughter, and this is with no prompting. This is with nothing. She looked at me and said, "Hey, Daddy, can I coach this? Can I be on camera?" She just likes to be on camera. But this is what came out of her mouth. All right.
Try the.
Yeah, I see. Can I hear?
No, try the volume button over there.
See, no, mine's all the way up.
Bummer.
All right.
Can you pull it up on your phone or your Instagram?
No. Maybe. I don't know. That might take a little while. Not sure. That stinks. But anyway, I'll play it anyway.
You continue on. You continue on. I'm gonna find it.
Okay. All right. So this is Hope coaching, and I'll just let it. You won't be able to hear it maybe, but you can kind of watch her play. And I just kind of want you to watch her expressions, and maybe Brendan can find it. So ears, eyes, and body. All right. They need to hear you. They need to watch you, and they need to understand what they're trying to do kinesthetically. So this is 3-way people learn, right? They learn with their ears if they can hear it. They learn with their eyes if they can see it. And some people, and this frustrates coaches sometimes, they need to actually do the exercise as you're explaining it. So I tell a lot of folks when I'm coaching new coaches, especially if you are coaching like middle school kids, or if you're coaching high school kids, or even some adults, if you start doing an exercise and they start trying to mimic you, and they start, or maybe they even like start to do the exercise on another piece of equipment somewhere else, I very rarely get offended by that. And the reason is because they may need to put themselves in position and may need to feel it a little bit first before they can get into it. So when you're demonstrating, you want to demonstrate the way you want the exercise performed. And again, if Brittany can find that, it's a really good way. Hope gets down. She tells people, put your back toe into the ground like you're digging a hole. And she just uses a lot of cues. And this is all from her watching myself and watching Coach Taylor, who is my business partner, coach online. So remember, when you're demonstrating, they need to be able to hear you. They obviously need to be able to see you. And they may actually need to be able to play with that exercise a little bit before they actually get into the training part of that. So make sure that when you're demonstrating the way that you want the exercise performed. And I've heard, just in conversation, the coaches can always tell who coaches the group by the way the kids do cleans, because they look
Mm-hmm.
exactly like the coach does. And I can tell you right now, if Mike Hudson coaches a clean, or if I coach a clean, or if Taylor coaches a clean, you can go through and you can tell which kids have been in whose class just based off of the way that they do certain exercises, because they look exactly like their coach. And a lot of adults will do the same thing as well. So if you want your athletes and your clients to move well and to do exercises correctly, demonstrate them correctly. Lazy demonstrations will give you lazy exercises.
You can keep going. I'm almost there. You have a lot of videos on Game Time, so I'm still
I know,
searching,
right?
but I'm gonna find it. So
All right. So really quick, when you're demonstrations should take less than 20 to 30 seconds per exercise. Now, if you've ever taken a CFSC course, then you know that once you start talking, you're on the timer. And after about 25 seconds, if you've got a coach like, Brendan, he's probably going to tell you to stop because you're probably losing clients. If I spend too much time talking about a specific bullet point, I'm going to lose you guys as well. People's attention spans just don't work like that. You're going to have to bring up new stuff relatively quickly if you want to get your point across. And the goal of your session is to get the clients moving. They didn't pay money to listen to you talk and to listen to how much knowledge you have about exercise. They paid money to the facility, or they paid money to you to move and to exercise and to train. So exercises, no matter what they are, can be explained in 20 seconds or less if you use a couple of these methods. The John Wooden method is the do this, not this, do this method. And I'm sure you've heard this if you've been on any kind of certified functional strength coach or any kind of mic talk or anything like that. But if I'm explaining a split squat, I'm going to tell them, here's what I want you to do in a split squat. Here's an example of something I don't want you to do in a split squat. And then here's something I do want you to do in a split squat. And then we're going to move on to the next exercise if that is appropriate, if we're working maybe in a superset. The other method that I like, it's called the SET method, the SET method. One is the setup. I'm going to explain the setup when I'm coaching a split squat. Guys, we're going to start the split squat like the Drake song. We're going to start from the bottom with our back knee on the ground and our front leg and our back knee at 90 degrees with a nice big tall chest. That's my setup. My execution, guys, after we get set up, we're going to stand up and we want to remain nice and vertical. We want to be an elevator. We don't want to be an escalator. So I'm going to move up and down like an elevator, and then I'm going to move back and forth like an escalator. Tell them that's not what they want them to do. And then I'm going to give them perhaps a technique tip. Guys, one of the things that will help you move like an elevator is if you'll drive your back heel into the wall. If there's not a wall there, if you'll dig your ball of your foot into the ground like you're trying to dig a hole, if you can find the one where Hope says it, it'll help you move straight up and down. So again, set up, execution, what you want them to do, and then a technique tip right there. And when we're explaining exercises, we have to pay attention to our cueing. All right. So there are two types of cues. And if you follow this at all, you already know what's coming. You have internal cues that are going to focus more on what the body is doing. Flex your elbow in a bicep curl. We want to bring your wrist to your shoulder by flexing our elbow, and we're going to tighten down our rib cage. Those are internal cues. It's what your body's doing. External focus cues are cues that are going to focus on what the goal of the exercise may be. So in the bicep curl exercise, I don't want to talk about the elbow. I literally just want to tell them, I want you to bring that dumbbell up next to your shoulder. All right. So you should finish like, I don't know, in the South, you get people to blow, like there's big diesel trucks that roll around, and to get them to blow their horns, like a game you play as a kid, and they pull down like this, right? So you want to finish in this position as if you were asking that truck driver to blow their horn. That would work down here in the South. All right. But the more external cues you can use, the better outcomes will be. And there's a lot of research and science behind this. And it can get very, very cerebral. We just tend to operate better that way when we use more external cues. Now, I will say this, if we're going to use the setup method, or if we're working with beginners, internal cues might be more helpful in the setup, not in the execution, but in the setup. Internal cues are probably going to be a little bit more helpful than external cues. When we're talking about execution, when we're talking about what we want that exercise to look like, and when we're doing our demonstration, then we want to use those external cues. I want you to pop that thigh forward. I want you to push the ground or punch the ground away in a sprint. These kind of external cues will help athletes understand what they want their body to do versus what they want their joints or muscles or something like that to do. So again, if you want a lot more information and some of the science and research behind some of these internal and external cues, I highly recommend Nick Winkelman's book, The Language of Coaching. Like I said, Dr. Nick Winkelman. He's also somebody that if you've ever had the opportunity to watch him coach a group, it's fascinating because of his use of external cues and things of that nature.
I found the video.
You found the video? Can you play it, or you want me to go back?
No, here. I'm gonna switch, and then I'll hand the baton back off to you. But here it is.
All right.
Now, you tell me if you can hear it.
All right.
Can you hear it?
No.
There
you go, man.
Hold on. There's a way to make it into. I just need to change it to internal speaker. Here we go. Brendan's AirPods, built-in microphone, select a speaker. Okay, here we go. Oh, microphone. So internal microphone. Now tell me.
No, I still can't hear it.
No?
Nah.
Bummer. Well, I'm going to put this link in the chat so everybody can watch it later.
That'll work. That will work.
Oh. Back to you.
All right.
You can steal the screen back.
All right.
We tried.
I know that sucks. She'll be disappointed because I told her she was going to be in the presentation.
Yeah, I just sent it in the chat box to everybody.
All right, cool.
So they can watch it.
Great. So there is also another resource out there that you can go to find more internal and external cues, and it's from this guy. Let's see. Come on. There we go. It's from this guy that invented apparently rules and checklists and a lot of other things.
I knew that was coming. Yes, so, I invented rules.
He invented rules. But anyway, I will use this as a shameless plug. I'm not getting paid by Brendan at all, but this coaching rules book is absolutely fantastic. It's a little bit less cerebral than Nick's book, and it's really, really nice for coaches. A book that they can really, really easily digest. And we're reading it as a staff right now, and we're reading about 5 rules a day, and then we're talking about it every Friday. So this will absolutely elevate your game as far as a coach goes. And there's a section in the back of the book that talks about external cues to use. And like our staff is using them to make sure that no matter who's coaching, we're using similar cues. And the reason that I think that this is important, as funny as this slide is, and it's a lot funnier with the snake on his head too. Yeah. But as funny as this slide is, I think the beauty of this is that if I take a class from Brendan and then I go and take a class from Dan, or I go and take a class, if they're saying the similar things, if they're using similar cues. Now, I understand personalities are going to be different. Tempo and timing and speech and things like that are going to be different, but they're saying a lot of similar things. And I know that that group is on the same page. It's the equivalent of me going to McDonald's. Let's not use McDonald's. It's the equivalent of me. It's the equivalent of me going to Baskin Robbins and getting Jamocha almond fudge ice cream in Columbia, and then going to a Baskin Robbins in Boston and getting Jamocha almond fudge in Boston, and it tasting the same. It's going to feel the same. It's going to taste the same. It's going to smell the same. So it makes that member a lot more comfortable, because then you don't have that, well, Brendan says do it this way. So if I do it this way that you're saying, Drew, am I doing it incorrectly? If you're using a lot of the similar cues and things like that, and that's going to make those sessions feel a lot better for your clients. This is a big one for me. Take responsibility for the way the exercises are performed. And I like to coach my groups as if people that I respect in the industry, if Mark Verstegen walked into a class that I coached at game time, I would hope that after the class was over, that he would look at me and say, that was a really, really good job. All of your people move really, really well, and they do exercises the correct way, because their form is my responsibility. So that second bullet point, their form is your responsibility. If I walk into a class and I watch you and your athletes are moving sloppily and you are not taking the time to correct that sloppy movement, then that says a lot about what you're willing to accept as a coach. And if you're first coaching kids at a middle school level or a high school level, or perhaps adults for the first time, then you can be really, really strict in what you will allow as sloppy technique or a great technique, because you're going to set them up for training years, months, days, all that good stuff to come. So their form is your responsibility. And if you see something you don't like, here's kind of a way that you can kind of get out of that. If you see something you don't like, change the cue. Maybe it's just a cue that you're using that doesn't resonate with them. If I used the truck driver cue to teach a lat pull down in the South, that's going to make a lot of sense. Guys, we're going to get in a half kneeling posture. We're going to start this exercise like Drake from the bottom. We're going to reach tall like we know the answer to a question in class. We're going to grab our handle, and we're going to pull our elbow down toward our rib cage as if we're trying to get the truck driver to blow its horn. As I reach back up, I want to rotate that down like I'm trying to get that truck driver to blow its horn. If you're in the South, that's going to make a lot of sense. But that cue is probably not going to work very well in other parts of the country. So I have to change the cue. Maybe I say, you've got an annoying little kid right at your hip, and you're just going to give him an elbow shot right there on top of the head. Make it funny. Make it something, right? Make it. There you go. So make it funny.
Wait, who's Drake? Who's Drake?
wait a minute.
What if I don't know who Drake is?
Then you have to change the artist. All right.
Okay.
You know, change something about the cue. The second thing that you can do if you see something you don't like, and this will fix 90% of problems, change the load. It's either too light in some cases, or a lot of cases, the majority of cases, it's probably just too heavy. So if you change the load or you take away the load and transform it into more of a body weight exercise or an assisted exercise, probably going to clean up their technique a little bit. The second thing you can do is change the speed. You can change the height of the box, or like if we're squatting to a 12-inch box and they just bottom out, then maybe we make it a 15-inch box, or we bring the floor up to them. So change the cue, change the load, the speed, or the height. If none of that works, change the exercise. Just go to a regression. We've got great regression and progression sheets provided to us by CFSC, things like that. So change the exercise. If you know what you're trying to train, if I'm trying to train a bilateral knee dominant movement and goblet squat isn't working, I can absolutely change that exercise. Maybe I need to change it to a unilateral knee dominant movement, or maybe I need to give them a TRX or a band or something to where they can squat. Or maybe if they're trying to do front squats, they're not getting that. All right. But maybe they can hold a sandbag in that Zerker position, and that cleans up that movement. So feel free to do that if you see something you don't like. This is going to apply more to game time. This is why I present it to our staff. The one thing that is a time killer when you're doing your demonstrations is if you have to run all over the gym to demonstrate different things. So if my suspension trainers are right here and my split squats stands are at the other end of the gym, and I'm teaching ring rows and rear foot elevated split squats, and they're way far apart, then that's going to, I'm going to have to do a couple things that is not really great. I'm going to have to take time to teach this exercise and then get over there. I'm going to have to turn my back to my audience, and I'm going to have to talk to them from afar. So if they're all against the rings, now I'm yelling across the gym. Sometimes that can't be avoided. But if I can, and I've done what I need to, I can bring a split squat stand over there, or it might not be a split squat stand, but maybe I can bring a bench over there so that I can demonstrate a rear foot elevated split squat right there, and then tell them we're going to do our ring rows here, and then you're going to go over there where our split squat stands are set up, and that's where we're going to do our rear foot elevated split squats. So if you can think about it, you can bring all of your demonstration equipment to one place. That way you're not moving around and you're never having to turn your back to the audience that you're trying to demo in front of. So these things can be really, really helpful in the flow and the logistics of the training session. In my opinion, your voice is the best weapon that you have. You have to have the loudest voice in the room. All right. Because adults, athletes, kids, all of them are going to talk while you're talking. And yes, it's annoying. Yes, it's irritating. And yes, in middle school, you'll hear me double clap and I'll tell them, hey, look at me when I'm talking, eyes open, mouths closed. But in an adult situation, there's probably going to be some adults that are going to be offended if I do that. So I have to have other techniques that will get them to understand that I am saying something that's going to be of importance to them. I might turn down the music a little bit. I might say, guys, we're doing something we've never done before. And if you do it wrong, you're going to get hurt. But you can use some of these things with your voice because it's your most powerful weapon you have. You have to have the biggest voice in the room, and it needs to be of a commanding nature. This is very natural for myself. It's very natural for guys like Brendan and Dan that I've heard and listened to coach. Some people have a real struggle with this, especially if they're coming from a clinical setting, because there's other clinicians working in that area. They're usually working close one-on-one with somebody, and they have gotten used to this voice that's a little bit more timid, and that we're talking, and now it's not necessarily an intense environment. So we're going to work on your quad strength in a weight room, in a strength and conditioning setting. Guys, we're working goblet squats today, and we're going to go dumbbell goblet squat. We're going to put that dumbbell right under our chin. It's going to touch our sternum. It's going to touch our chest. If it comes away from our chest, we know we're doing it wrong, and we're going to do it this way, or we're going to do it in this fashion. So you have to have the biggest voice in the room, and it needs to be commanding. If you don't do this naturally, then go into the shower, go into the bathroom, and practice this. Yes, you're going to sound silly. And if you're by yourself, nobody else is going to hear you. But you need to have a voice that starts to carry. And if you don't have a voice that carries naturally, you might have to go turn down the music so that your voice can be projected a little bit louder and a little bit more clear. You can use things like I use the double clap. All right, guys, here's what we're going to do. Everybody, we're going to get ready to go. It's going to be a 10-minute time set. Everybody get where they want to be. Ready? Let's go. So they know that that double clap or that beep on my gym boss means that they need to be doing something. The second thing you want is you need to be clear and definitive in your instructions. And this goes back to that 20 seconds of trying to demonstrate certain exercises. Clear and definitive instructions. Don't leave any room for error because, oh, yeah, you can do it like this, or you can do it like this, or whatever. Now, don't get that confused. I'm not telling you to not give them choices, but during your demonstrations, don't give them 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different ways to do something. That's not the time. When you're demonstrating, you need to be clear, definitive in your instructions. Guys, we're doing 3 sets of 8 repetitions of this exercise, and we're going to superset this exercise with this exercise. And we're doing 3 sets of 8 repetitions on that exercise as well. It's very clear. You know how many sets, you know how many reps, you know you're doing a superset. Okay. So those instructions and things need to be clear and very definitive, because rambling and mumbling and trying to explain or too much explanation, you will lose a group, and you will lose a younger group way faster than you will lose an older group. I witnessed somebody teaching class a couple of years ago, and they were talking to middle school kids, and they were talking to them about they were talking to them about shoulder blade or scapula retraction. They said these words, scapular retraction, to a bunch of 10, 11, and 12-year-old kids. They have no idea where their scapula is located. They don't know what retraction means. That word means absolutely nothing to them. But if you told those kids, I'm going to put an egg between your shoulder blades, and I want you to try to crush that egg, or squeeze the water out of a sponge, or squeeze the juice out of a lemon, or hold a pencil between your shoulder blades, that would give you the same scapular retraction that you're mumbling or talking about. Again, they don't care how much you know about exercise. They're paying you. They already assume that you know all these things. And if I'm talking to a group of you guys, it's going to be real fun to pull out those words. But if I'm talking to a group of clients or talking to a group of members that are paying me and trusting me with their health and fitness, I don't want to have to ramble and mumble too much. Because after, again, 20 to 30 seconds, you're probably losing them anyway. So you need to have the biggest voice in the room, be clear and definitive in your instructions. Rambling and mumbling too much will lose a group very, very quickly.
The one of Mike's favorite stories is about Kevin Carr being a 19-year-old intern, and after his internship, he asked for a job, and they didn't give him a job. They actually gave him another internship again because he was too quiet and not willing to speak up. Now, it partly has to do with confidence and understanding the system and being comfortable with teaching those things, but also, like you're saying, it comes with practice too. So there is a difference, like you're saying too, between the clinic, between personal training, right? The clinic, you're in a room that's usually 10 by 10. So there's a clinic voice, and then there's a personal training voice. You wouldn't want to use your group training voice for personal training. I call that a 12-inch voice, which is what they used to say in middle school when kids were talking too loud. They'd say 12-inch voices, 12-inch voices. And then there's what you're talking about, the back of the room voice. And also, I like the way you described it, is it should end in statements. So this is what you're going to do, period. This is what we're going to do next, period. This is how we're going to do it, period. They're very direct and to the point, so there's no ambiguity there. And I just like telling that story about Kevin because that was Kevin's big crutch for a long time. And with confidence and practice, it's something you can get over. And I know there's a lot of trainers out there where speaking up and projection of their voice, not yelling. It's not yelling, it's projection. And some people are much better at it than others, just like everything. There's people who start with a leg up in certain exercises or certain coaching things. And there's things that we all need to work on. So it is, I'm totally agreement with you that it is something you can practice, and that it is partly confidence, but then there's also 3 different voices you can have. There's the clinic, there's the 12-inch voice, and then there's the back of the room voice. So I just like sharing that story because it's someone who's relative, and everyone thinks that like he just had it when he started, or people think that I just like wanted to be a coach and I was a good coach. I was an awful coach at the start. I was an awful public speaker for the first 7 years. I'm not even that good still yet, but I'm better than I used to be. So just like anything else, it comes with confidence and practice.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And there's no substitute for experience. Get your reps in, whether you're, the 10,000 hour rule, whatever wherever that's, comes from, or whatever you adhere to, or whatever. Like reps, 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 reps. I really like Coach Boyle's. You need exposure. The more exposure you have, and like regarding like middle school kids training, they need repetition, not repetitions, meaning that they
Right.
need, a lot of more of exposure and just not a lot of reps.
And real quick, Anna asked what the shit test is,
Oh,
and
I
the
forgot
shit
that
test
point.
is that it looks like shit. It probably is shit, so you should probably fix it. And that was one of the big things that we would have with our coaches, is that there would be an athlete standing in front of a coach, and they would be folding into themselves. They would be doing the exercise completely wrong, and the coach would just stand there and not say anything, like a deer in the headlights. And that was Mike's big thing. He's like, hey, that form looks really shitty. You should probably fix that. And
Yep.
that was one of his favorite sayings, because you shouldn't have to stand there and say, hey, that looks bad. You should probably fix that. Because if it looks bad, then there's no question that you should do something about it. So don't just stand there and stare at it.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
where that comes from.
Yeah, I apologize for glossing over that. I think
Right.
everybody, if you listen to Boyle for a long time, you've probably heard of that. You've probably seen the now infamous slide of him going out in his backyard and like literally taking a picture of his dog's fecal excrement there, and putting it in a slide. But yeah, that's exactly what Brendan's talking about. Everybody knows what good movement looks like. If it looks like shit, then it probably is, and you probably need to address it. So hopefully that answers your question. I apologize for running over that bullet point. The next thing we're going to talk about is being an active coach. And this is Pat Summit. She is now deceased and probably recognized as one of the best coaches, regardless of gender, in the country recently. Pat was the head women's basketball coach at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and she was very, very successful. And she's often, recalled to talk about coaching strategy and coaching techniques and why she got so much out of her athletes and why she was so successful. She was Nick Saban before Nick Saban was Nick Saban. She was Bill Belichick before Bill Belichick was Bill Belichick. Pat Summit was somebody that you would want to study if you're interested in being a high quality coach. And you can look at the picture. That is not a coach that doesn't care. And that's the big thing I want you to take away from that picture. That right there is not a coach that doesn't care. And you're going to be hard pressed to find a picture of Pat where it doesn't look something like this. Now, she's either really, really excited, or she's really, really mad, or she's really, really fired up at something that her kids did well or something that her kids didn't do well. And we don't know, because I don't know the context of that particular picture, but I want you to be an active coach. One of the things that infuriates me while watching coaches on the floor is they get settled into one spot and they rarely move. Now, if you're running a circuit and you are the center of that circuit, then I want you spinning around like a top, because I understand that that might be a little bit different. But if you're coaching a group on the floor and you're not walking over to each area of where those exercises are being performed on the regular, then to me, you're not being an active coach. Because I can tell you that there can be 19 people in a class, and I can watch all 19 people perform repetitions of every exercise that they do in the class. Now, I'm not going to catch everybody every time, and I understand that. But if we're doing dumbbell snatches, half kneeling chops, and rear foot elevated split squats as a tricep, I can watch everybody perform all three of those exercises. And I'm going to see a couple of reps from everybody. But I really like, and if you listen to Joe Hashi yesterday, I like his kind of rule of, I want you to watch 3 reps and then give a command, or a comment, not a command, excuse me. 3 reps and a comment. And let's talk about that comment for a little bit. Feedback is very crucial. People want to know. And it also helps build rapport with your clients. But it also can be very non-emotional. It can be very boring a little bit, so to speak, because we want our feedback. It's crucial, but also make it specific. Because if I walk around and just tell Brendan good job all the time, well, he may be really excited about good job in the beginning. 6 months later, if I tell Brendan good job, I might as well have said, how's your day or what's the weather? And he's going to respond back, it's fine. It's nice and sunny out there. Like, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't carry any weight because I've said it so much that, and I think I'm being a good coach because I'm giving encouragement. Hey, great job, great job. What I need to say is, Brendan, great job on keeping your knees aligned with your shoelaces on that split squat. Or, that's a great job on that bench press. I think you could go up 5 pounds. Or, hey, that's a great job on those ring rows, pulling those shoulder blades together, but you're letting your hips dip right there at the bottom. Let's show you something to fix that. So feedback is crucial, but it also needs to be specific. And one of the things that we know about motor learning is that we want to reinforce what the clients are doing well. Nobody wants to hear what they're doing wrong all the time. And the way that we learn motor learning, or the way that we learn new movement patterns and motor patterns, it's like a sculptor. If you hand a sculptor a mound of clay, he is going to take away things, not add to things, until he comes up with his finer sculpture and that beautiful piece of art. That's the way our body learns a new motor pattern. So if you've ever read Todd's book, it's called Let the First Rep Suck. And that's kind of what it's about, is that as people are learning new exercises, you want to give constant encouragement on what they're doing right so that they continue to do the right things and start to eliminate some of the things that they're doing incorrectly that may be, damaging to that pattern. Now, don't get me wrong. If it's like biomechanically crap, going back to the shit test, if it's shit, then fix it and move on. But if they're doing things relatively well without, risk of injury, then continue to kind of coax and guide that movement pattern along by telling them what they're doing well. When you do make a correction on technique, here's the way that we want to do this. All right. We want to do this by giving nuances or details. Nuances and details on specific exercises don't belong in your demonstration. That's just going to take up more time, and we're going to be over our 20 to 30-second guideline. But when I'm talking about bench pressing, then maybe what I want to do is say, all right, guys, we got bench press today. We're going to get our thumbs in an even space so that our hands are even. We're going to unrack the bar, pull our shoulders away from our ears. We're going to pull that bar down, let it touch our chest, and then push it back to the ceiling. All right. We don't want our elbows to flare out. We're going to pull it down, touch our chest, and punch the ceiling. That's my demonstration. But when I'm talking to somebody, I might give more nuances or more details. Hey, in this particular set, if it's a heavier set for you, you want to look at your non-dominant hand and squeeze it. That's a neural technique that will help them drive through a heavier bench press. Or, hey, on this set, I want you to focus on pushing your feet through the floor to gain more stability, and that's going to clean up that bar path with you. That's not stuff that you're going to say to get them started. That's stuff that you're going to tell them as they're exercising to help improve their technique if they're doing something perhaps incorrectly. Other thing that we want to give feedback on is intensity. We want athletes and we want people to work out at the right intensity. So if folks are doing things that are too light, I'll walk around all the time and I'll look at somebody, Claire, that's way too light. You need to go up a dumbbell on your next set. Or, hey, Janet, that might be I think the reason that you want me to help you out, or I'm about to make one of my favorites is, hey, Janet, I'm about to make your life a whole lot easier. And they usually look at me and say, oh my gosh, how? Because I can see them struggling with an exercise and I can say, hey, let's take off a little bit, or let's hold the weight here, or let's do something else. So we want to give feedback not only on technique, but on intensity of how they're training. All right. So you can give technique based on overload, like what's the next overload progression. So if somebody's like knocking out goblet squats and they're, up to like the 100-pound dumbbell, then maybe during that exercise, hey, next week, instead of the 100-pound dumbbell for 10, let's go over here and let's show you barbell front squats if that's something that is appropriate in your facility. Or instead of 10 reps, hey, Drew, you're doing really good with that. You're making those 10 reps look easy. And I know we've got 3 sets of 10 today, but for you, because that's you're doing so well with that, let's bump that up and challenge you a little bit this week. And let's go 3 sets of 12. So you can instruct them on the next progression. You can instruct them on more reps. Because remember, ultimately, you're the coach in your Super Bowl, you're the coach, and they're the player. And you want your players to perform at their best. And then make it personal and get to know them. Like, that's huge, right? Because I am more, if Brendan tells me that a post that I want to post on Facebook is full of angst and bald hair, bald bearded rage, then I'm probably going to listen to him and maybe take that post down, or it's going to mean a lot more coming from Brendan because we are so close and we're friends. I can tell you in this picture, all 5 of these girls, I can obviously all tell you their names, and I can tell you that 4 out of the 5 girls, their parents train with us. So getting to know people and building that rapport is also going to help you when you do have to make a correction, or you do have to make some kind of technical, hey, like that doesn't look really well. If that comes from somebody that you don't know very well, then that might be a little bit offensive, or you may be a little bit offended by that. We've had that happen with people coming in. Well, I've trained at this place or this place before, and then we haven't taken the time to build, and it happens to me. I haven't taken the time to build rapport with that person, and I might tell them a little bit of a different technique, and you can kind of tell that conversation doesn't go as smoothly as you'd like, just because. And then I think back and I think, okay, she wasn't necessarily doing anything that was biomechanically incorrect, but she doesn't know me very well yet. So for me to approach her like that and say that she might be doing something a little bit incorrect when she's already told me she's had previous exercise experience, that might be a little bit offensive to her. So maybe I need to, change my approach a little bit. I always say that when you do make corrections, a lot of your approaches is kind of like, it's like golf. Like, it's like the approach that you take that will dictate the outcome of that. And as always, and we're getting close to the end here, communicate, 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 communicate. This is the number one thing I think that we can do as coaches. And you guys know, if you've been doing this for a long time, that communication with your clients is key. And if you need some help with that, check out Brett Bartholomew's book called Conscious Coaching. There's some really good tips and techniques about how to read people in that book. Jenny Rearick and Voltaire Communications is a good follow as well, to figure out how to communicate to people more clearly. And then also Fit to Speak on Instagram is another place that you can go to look for some of those kinds of things, because communication is that important. This next little section, or the last little section we're going to talk about, is one that I get questions often, especially if I'm out at conferences. And how do you deal with beginners coming into class where people that might already be exercising? So here are just some tips and some takeaways, and this, we'll wrap it up with this. Number one, understand that if you're learning something new, or you're coming into something new for the first time, it can be really, really intimidating. And I can speak for myself, because this year I took up mountain biking again. I mountain biked a little bit after college. And then this year, obviously with COVID and things like that, I took it back up and found that I was not as good at all. And everybody on the trail was really, really nice, and they had experience and things like that. But I was still a little bit intimidated because I couldn't do a lot of the things that I saw other people do, and they made it look easy. It was really, really difficult for me to do, and to go over some of the terrain and things like that. So oftentimes I would end up going by myself so that I didn't feel like I looked stupid, or if I went with 3 or 4 other people that were better than me, I wouldn't hold them up. And that really changed my mindset about how people deal when they're coming into the facility, and maybe trying out exercise for the first time. The first thing we want to do is introduce them to someone in the class, not the whole class. And I know this sounds kind of silly, but if we're in a group of 18 or 19 people and you're new and you're already intimidated, then I'm not going to say, guys, I want everybody to make Brendan feel welcome. Let him know that you're here and all this good stuff, or whatever. Then all the spotlight comes on Brendan, and that even, obviously makes that intimidation that much more. But if I bring Brendan over to where we're foam rolling and I say, hey, Brendan, come sit right here. This is Franco. Franco's been training with us for 6 years. Franco knows everything. So if you get lost, just ask him a question. He'll be glad to help you out if you can't find me or if I'm working with somebody else at the time. So now Brendan knows Franco, Franco knows Brendan, but it's not this big spotlight. Hey, this is a new person that we have in class. So that's a really good way to introduce them into the class. Second thing is treat them like they've never trained before. And I'll often tell them this. Hey, Caroline, I'm going to coach you like you've never worked out before. Hope you don't find that offensive, but I just want to make sure that I'm not going to skip steps. And I want to make sure that I meet you where you are versus me just trying to throw you into our program. So if you're already familiar with an exercise, please feel comfortable to tell me. But when we go goblet squat, then I'm going to start you with assisted body weight squat. And if you do that well on your first set, then we might go up to body weight squat on your second set. Then on our third set, we might go to goblet squat. But if you're already familiar with that, then let me know and let's take a look at that technique to make sure that we're doing it the way that we want to do it and safe and all that good stuff. So treat them like they've never trained before and don't skip steps. It's just where that progression sheet that you have for CFSC, if you have it, is going to be so important. Because if I see somebody, if I'm in phase 3 in my adult program in March, and somebody comes in that's brand new, and we're all the way up to double kettlebell front squat, I'm not going to throw that new person into double kettlebell front squat. I can go into phase 2 and see what we did for that exercise, and maybe that exercise was dumbbell goblet squat. Or if it's a beginner, then I can go all the way into phase 1. And while everybody else is doing dumbbell kettlebell front squat, this person might be doing body weight squats and looking at technique. So this is just a really easy way to deal with beginners. Don't introduce them to everybody. Introduce them to someone and treat them like they've never trained before, and don't skip steps. Don't throw somebody into a kettlebell swing just because everybody else is doing it. Take them aside, teach them the hip hinge, teach them the kettlebell deadlift. And if they do both of those well, then maybe on that third set, we can move into swings. The other things that we can do, position yourself in front of the new people or persons if you can. If you have a group of 2 or 3 that are new and a group of 8 or 9 that are not, put those 2 or 3 people together and position yourself in front of those people while you're doing your warm-up and when you're doing your demonstration so that they can be, so you can be really, really clear and they know they're looking at you. And again, it just helps kind of build that rapport. So position yourself in front of them as often as you can. Treat them like they are in a one-on-one session and be the best beginner coach you can be. This is a quote from Jim Wendler. Love his stuff about coaching. And he oftentimes says, coaches get into it because they want to coach people how to do safety bar squats with chains and bands. If they're doing that, they're probably training themselves. You can be the best beginner coach you can, and you're going to treat them as if they're in a one-on-one session. If we have 10 people in a group and Nicole is my newbie or my beginner, then I'm going to tell everybody what to do. I'm going to do my demonstrations. I'm going to be clear. I'm going to do all those things. And then when everybody else is starting to exercise, I'm going to walk over to Nicole and say, Nicole, come with me. We're going to start at this exercise. I'm going to teach her like we are in a one-on-one session. And after she knocks out 5 reps that look pretty good, then I might walk away and say, now, Nicole, let's follow me over here. When you get done with your 10, I'll meet you at the bench press and we'll go over that one as well. And then I'll meet you over at the cables and we'll go over that one as well. So treat that new person like they're in a one-on-one session. As far as reps and volume goes, volume equals soreness. So the more volume you throw at somebody, the more sore they're going to be and the worse their experience is going to be. So automatically go and reduce the sets and reps of a new person. You're doing 3 sets of 15 on week 4, and week 1 was 3 sets of 8. Let's regress that new person, even though it's week 4, all the way down to those week 1, 3 sets of 8 reps. That way we reduce that volume, we reduce that soreness, and they don't feel like they're struggling trying to keep up. By the time they do 8, somebody else has probably already done 15. So just keep that in mind when you're coaching new folks. And in conditioning, tell them to go at their own pace. Give them alternative exercises. Hey, we're going to run today. We're going to do tempo runs. All I want you to do is walk today. Or, hey, during our conditioning, it's fairly intense. And since this is your first day, let's go over here and ride the bike. And I want you to get a half a mile while these guys are doing this, and we'll catch you up to those kinds of things. So give them alternatives, give them choices, let them decide on what's going to be best for them, and don't just, push your program onto someone else. And then at the end of the session, that's when you're going to introduce them maybe to the whole class while you're stretching or whatever your breakdown protocols are or whatever. Because now at the end of class, they've made it the whole hour and everybody's stretching. Guys, thanks a lot. We'll see you tomorrow. My common thing is we know you have a choice when it comes to health and fitness. Thanks for flying game time. We'll see you the next day. And by the way, Brendan, great job on day one. Excellent job on your first day. And then usually everybody claps is like, hey, good job, or people will come over, things like that. And it's just a really good experience for that new person. Hopefully that allows you some tips and things to work beginners into a class or a session where there's already people that are familiar with you and are familiar with your program. At the end of the session, guys, this is all no-brainer stuff. Attend to any member business. If people want to talk about, hey, this exercise hurt this, what does this look like? Obviously, clean up your equipment. Be considerate of the next coach or the next trainer that may use it. Obviously, right now, wipe down everything you can. And then if it's appropriate, all of our teams, we usually have some sort of breakdown or something like that to finish the session. Because nobody wants to just be like, okay, well, that's it. We'll see everybody later. If I ended this presentation with, yep, that's all I got. Thanks a lot. Then there's just something that can be left on the table that can provide a little bit to that member experience by ending the session a certain way. So guys, other resources that are going to be very helpful. You've heard me mention a lot of these things, and I'm going to plug a lot of my friends right here. Obviously, if you need help on exercise technique and things of that nature, get yourself to a CFSC. They can do it live. They can do it online now. You can go to live events now. They're just bringing those back. So get yourself to a CFSC course, either a level 1. Highly recommend both level 1 and level 2. If you need exercise technique tips, Kevin Carr's book's coming out. It's called Functional Training Anatomy through Human Kinetics. I'm really excited for that. We're going to buy a copy for the gym so that we can make sure that we're coaching and teaching things the right way. One of my favorite books is Advances in Functional Training from Mike. And then Brendan also has a product online called Exercise Checklist that has some presentations, and he has some really good information on there about certain standards of exercises and where do we want to get most adults to and where do we want to get athletes to. And it's a really good way to look at progressions and regressions of if they want to trap bar deadlift, what do they need to do or what do they need to check off before they are, ready to do the trap bar deadlift as opposed to just putting them in there. If you're looking for coaching resources, again, I'm going to plug Coaching Rules by Brendan Rearick. We can go back to that slide if we need to. Inside Out Coaching.
I'm not paying you anything for this.
Right. He will pay me a Miller Lite.
Yeah,
I will
how cheap
I will
I
get
am.
Miller Lite for this, and I'll be happy.
I'll pay for Miller Lights, but none of Kevin's expensive beers.
Right. No doubt. Inside Out Coaching by Joe Ehrman is fantastic if you haven't read that. And the next one's going to sound funny, but it's one of the best coaching books I've ever read, and it's a relatively short read. It's by Anson Dorrance, who is the head coach of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill soccer coach. He's the head coach of the soccer program there. And it's called Training Soccer Champions. And the first probably 90% of that book is all about coaching, and more specifically, coaching the female athlete. I can't recommend this book enough. It's one of my favorite books. I recommend it to anybody that's going to work with not only females, but going to work in a team setting. He addresses a lot of things in there that you just don't think about that have benefited him. And it's just got a lot of experience in there. And then the last probably, 10%, 15% of that book is going to be more soccer related. So if you're not into soccer, then you don't necessarily even have to read that part. But Training Soccer Champions is probably one of my favorite books. And then I mentioned this book earlier too. Let the First Rep Suck by Todd Bumgardner is also a really good other resource. So there are tons of other resources out there. I'm a big fan of education, as you can tell. So get yourself out there and you can teach yourself a lot of these things. If you want to know more about me or find me, then this is Drew Massey on Facebook. This is my lovely daughter, Hope. And this is us ice skating in Tennessee because it never gets cold enough. So we went to Murfreesboro a couple of weekends ago and did that. And that's her. And like I said, she's the reason that I do a lot of this stuff. But obviously you can follow me on Facebook. Game Time Sports and Training is our gym. You can look at that. We post stuff on there regularly, Facebook as well. Massey Strength Coach on Instagram, and then Game Time Sports TN on Instagram. If you want to see some of those TikToks that Brendan was talking about, and you can follow Game Time Training on TikTok. And then if you need to email me, or if you have any specific questions, you can always email me at train@gametimesportstn.com. And that, my friends, is the end of the slides. I appreciate your time, and I will open it back up. For those of you on the East Coast that are still awake, thank you so much. I appreciate
right.
it.
10 over there.
Yeah, no doubt. So if you have any questions, guys, feel free to answer or feel free to ask. I will do the best I can to give you an answer. And if I don't have one, I will refer to somebody that's smarter than me.
I'm going to just start with some comments while people either ask their questions in the chat box or raise their hand. We know you have a choice, so thanks for choosing us. That's a great way to end a session, because it's true. They have a choice of where they spend their money.
Absolutely.
Not the number one, but one of the top questions I get is, what do you do with people who show up to the group halfway through the session? So I love all your points. I won't go through them all again, but no, that's a great, it's great that you addressed that, because that's definitely one of the top questions I get. What do I do with somebody who's showing up while everybody else has been training here for 5 years? What do I do with that person? And then one thing about active coaching, one of my favorite analogies was actually my internship coordinator, Nicole Rodriguez, who went to Exos after Nick Winkleman. Her favorite thing to tell us was that everybody in this gym, every coach has a bag of sand on their back, or a sandbag in a backpack. And in your backpack, everybody has a different colored sand, and there's a hole, and that sand is slowly falling out. And I want your colored sand to literally be all over the entire gym. If there are any piles of sand, which means you are standing around, there's going to be a trouble. And she was serious. There was going to be a trouble.
Knowing Nicole very little, that is huge. That's a big time trouble.
I love that analogy for active coaching. Is I want you to think you have a backpack full of sand and there's a hole in it, and that your colored sand is literally everywhere, all over this gym, covering the whole thing. And I want no piles of sand. So I just love that analogy, and I'll never forget it. I mean, she told me that was 12, 13 years ago. So
that's really good.